Hello there, welcome back. So, in this session, we're going to go over, a few principles that parents tend to find very, very helpful, when it comes to parenting their children and guiding their kids, through the journey of life, essentially, right? And there's some frameworks that I have found over the years that if parents, keep in mind, really can be so very helpful, right? And so the first off is like, let's talk about, well, what is my job as a parent, right? Like essentially, what am I here to do? And so many parents, I find, they have this idea that they need to be perfect parents, right? They need to do everything right and make sure they don't do anything damaging to their kids. And they're kind of, obsessed about this idea of I need to be a perfect parent. But at the same point, when they say I need to be a perfect parent and they're worrying about making mistakes, we really haven't named, well, what does a successful parent look like? So I find it always helps with, well, let's talk about what is success? What's our job, as a parent in the first place? And if I were to sum it up in one word, it's self-reliance, right? It's like you are a leader, essentially as a parent to your children, to support them to become self-reliant as soon as possible. And so what do I mean by that, right? Like hopefully you are able to, support your children or child to become a productive member of society and be able to live without the need for you and your support as a parent. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't, support your kids, as they become adults or early adulthood or after they become quote unquote capable of supporting themselves. It doesn't mean that you can't still, be in their life, support them and train them and educate them and, help out and things like that. But the key is if they had to, could they? Right? Like when I think of self-reliance, that's really the question is if they had to, could they take care of themselves? And if we're honest about it, there are a lot of adult children today in their late 20s, early 30s even, who are living in mom and dad's basement who are literally incapable of taking care of themselves and the capacity to produce the means to be able to do so. And that's a big challenge, right? That's challenging for the parents, that's challenging for the kids. And obviously at a macro scale, that starts to break down society if we're honest and we're sincere, right? And it's just not much fun at the end of the day to feel like we've got this constant burden to worry about and we're unsure that, the children that you love so much are not going to be able to thrive in life. Like that's a lot of stress to live with inside of life. And so if we kind of start off the game, like right when children are born and go, wow, my job is to support this child, to lead this child to self-reliance, to be able to take care of themselves in all the ways that means, right? Take care of themselves physically, nutrition, take care of themselves financially, be able to be in relationships in a healthy way, emotional maturity, so that they can interact with society and be a member of society. Because there's nobody who thrives in life that isn't part of a community of some sort, that isn't interacting with other human beings in a healthy way. And what I find is a lot of parents, like consciously or unconsciously, they default to my job is to eliminate my child's pain and suffering. And that's a different focus, right? If we focus on, as parents, on like, hey, how do I eliminate my child's pain and suffering, and how do I basically, make sure they feel good all the time? That's a very different relationship and job that we're taking on, the elimination of my kid's pain. If you take on the relationship, which a lot of parents do, which is my child's hurting and in pain, therefore I'm failing, and my job is to eliminate their pain, this is where we are more likely to go into the role of enabling and trying to save our children, which ultimately cripples them from becoming self-reliant, right? It breaks them down as opposed to builds them up, okay, as an example. And so if we, look at the different situations that come up, in our child's life and as we raise them and as we're a family together, if we go, hey, how do I support them to become strong? How do I support them to be self-reliant, to really make sure they are able to take care of themselves and potentially support children of their own later, lead other people later, a different awareness is going to come, and different, how do we say, intuition is going to come around how do I support my kids? How do I raise them? How do I lead them? How do I be there for them in the highest way? And so, if I look at my job being to create self-reliance, it's like my job becomes more clear too, just by way of definition. It's like, oh, my job is to be a parent to them. My job is to lead them, right? My job isn't really to be their friend all the time. Matter of fact, you're not going to be their friend most of the time, because a friendship is a different role than, parenting or leadership, right? And so if we go, wow, my job is self-reliance, all of a sudden from a young age, like even when they're small, 3, 4, 5 years old as an infant, like how to engage with them, occurs differently if that's the idea, if that's the goal, right? And so if we think, man, those first period of life, right? If we think of different periods of development, 0 to 5, right, is where they are developing the routines of how they're going to be in the world, and they're copying everything around them. And so the best way to train or teach your children, especially when they're young, although this is true their entire growing up, right, their entire developmental, period, is by way of example, right? Monkey see, monkey do really is how kids learn. And so if as children, you have a routine, right? You wake up kind of the same time every day. You get ready. You eat, healthy food, and the child is just doing those things with you. Then the child's learning all of that through you, not just the practical stuff, right? Like how to clean oneself, how to take care of oneself, how to feed, how to eat, how to do all that kind of stuff. But they're also learning emotional patterns. And so how are you interacting with your spouse and your friends? And how are you experiencing yourself as you're with your child? And like the way you manage joy, or if you feel inspired, or you feel happy, like the child learns all that through you. When you get frustrated, how do you manage that frustration? How do you act that frustration out? When you feel sad, how do you manage that sadness? When you feel disappointed, how do you manage that disappointment? Like if you think about it in that way, like the way you do life from an internal reality and also an external reality is first and foremost how children learn, right? They're going to copy all of that from you just by way of osmosis, because their unconscious mind is just wide open and their brain is in a constant delta state, and they're just taking in all the information. And so there's this, great opportunity to influence your kids right from the get-go if we bring a little bit of awareness to how do we do that. And so the two things to think about when we are, with an infant, right, young age, 0 years of age to 5 or 6 years old or so, maybe 7, is number one, remember, even when they're little, my job is to support this child to build the foundation that later is going to translate to self-reliance, right? How do I do that? And first and foremost, it's like, don't think about the child as a child. Think about the child as a person, right? Talk to the child just like they're a person, just like they're a member of your family. What I find is like people do this interesting thing with children and pets as an example, just to give you an example of this, right? When it comes to children and pets, people talk in a cute voice for some reason, right? They go up to their child or a pet when it's little and they go, oh, how are you doing, you cute little thing? And they like sort of talk down to children and pets, right? I was just thinking about it today. I got a little dog. His name is Spence, right? He's a little guy. And, this plumber, right? My plumber is in the house today. And he's, doing all the things around the house, right? He's installing, a new toilet and whatever, because I just I remodeled the bathroom. And, Spence went to greet him at the door. And here's this kind of like very manly, gruff plumber. As soon as he sees Spence, he goes, oh, how you doing, little guy? And he's talking, in this cute little voice, right? It's hilarious to watch people interact because he's cute and he's like excited and he's got one eye because he had a little accident a while back. And so, people immediately, kind of engage with him that way. I've never engaged with my dog that way. I just talk to him like he's a person, right? Obviously, he's a dog, he's not a person. But when I used to train kids in martial arts, right, they would start, 3 years of age, and they would go up to about 7-ish or so. We called it the Little Tigers class. And I always talked to them like they were little people. Obviously, their comprehension is different, okay, in terms of what they can understand. but there's no reason to talk down to children. There's no reason to like try to put on a cute voice for them. Just speak to them as though they are capable of what they're doing and assume they will be capable, and they tend to be capable, right? When I explain things to them, I would educate them. Now, obviously, you have to meet them at their level, right, of understanding and intellect and that kind of thing. But if you sort of assume your child is capable of doing things and you teach them and you guide them and that's your expectation, they'll tend to live up to that expectation. If you treat your children and your ideas, they're not capable because they're little, right? They can't carry their own skis, right? I'm at a ski resort, and you see two different types of families when you go skiing, right? You see a 5 or 6 year old walking along, and the parents got all the gear, right? They got the skis in one arm, and that's their skis, and then they got their kids' skis, and they're carrying 6 pairs of skis and dragging the kid behind them, right? It's like we don't think about it, but that little act that seems so insignificant, we missed an opportunity there, right? Instead of building self-reliance from the get-go, we started to enable and try to take care of their pain, alleviate their challenge with something as little as skiing, right? Whereas another alternative, and you see these parents too, is like, listen, if you'd like to ski, your job is to carry your skis. And they're like, their skis are a little bitty, right? They're tiny just like they are. And if you show them how to carry the skis and you walk with them a little bit, and they might need to take a little break, right? And they might need to, pause for a minute or whatever. But something as little as like, hey, carry your own skis. Come on, let's go. All of a sudden, it just starts to occur to them to do things for themselves. Right? If you ask them to do things for themselves and you treat them as capable and you show them how, and you set that sort of boundary with them of, no, these are your skis, you carry them, like that might seem insignificant, but let's translate that as a way of being later on down the road. All of a sudden it's like that child, when they need to apply for their college exams, does so themselves. They do their own paper. They fill it out, right? I've coached plenty of parents where the kid didn't even do their own college exam, right? The parents sat with them the whole time to do their essays and like fill out the college, admission forms and things like this. And in some cases, the parents literally did it for the kid to get them into college, right? And so it's like, how does that kid do in life if they can't even apply for their college exams? Because guess what comes next? Applying for a job. So are you going to call your parents up when you need to apply for a job? Are your parents going to do the job interview for you too? Like, no, you're going to be in big trouble if you don't start right off the bat. How do we start to recondition and reinforce self-reliance? Okay. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean you can't help them out here and there, but like these little things that seem insignificant that are literally just a way of being, if that's just how you do things, it starts to occur to the child as, I can do that for myself. And so as they show capacity, expect them to sort of do for themselves, rely on themselves in the ways that they can. And, that's obviously safe, right? You're not going to teach a 7-year-old how to cook at the stove. Like that may not be a great idea, but they can help set the table. They can, manage their own food. They can feed themselves. They can put the plate, over in the kitchen or something. Like if you just think about it this way, all of a sudden, right from the get-go, you start to teach different things, right? And so number one, expect capacity from them and talk to them, interact with them like they're a person. Obviously, you're going to have to speak to their level of comprehension because that's different when a child is 5 or 6 as opposed to 18 years old. But if you speak to them like they're a person and expect capacity, and look for those little ways that you can support and create self-reliance, and you ask yourself, hey, what can my kid do? Are they able to do this? And then set a soft boundary and expect them to do it. All of a sudden, that's what they pick up in life. They just do things for themselves, right? It occurs to them to learn on their own, to try new things. And that conditioning starts at a very young age and then can be reinforced throughout adulthood. Obviously, it's easier to start off like that and just reinforce it all the way through into adulthood as opposed to, try to support and alleviate the pain and, do everything for your child and then somewhere along the road change that behavior. It's a lot harder to change that up when they're 15 or 18, something like this. So see capacity, expect them, expect capacity from them, and talk to them just like they're a person, right? Just like I'm talking to you right now. Talk to your kids this way, and they'll respond, right? Another little trick that I always used to do when we trained children at the martial arts studio is instead of always talking down to a child because they're a little person, it's helpful to, especially if you're wanting to, get their attention and keep their attention, is to kneel so that you're literally just at their same level and so you're talking to them, right? Because we don't think about perspective. Little people walk through the world and they look up and everybody and everything is so big and they're always getting talked down to. That's different than talking with the person, right? Be with them. Talk to them, not at them, right? So often we tend to talk at children as opposed to children. And so if we make these little modifications, all of a sudden you're going to see, relationship change and dynamics evolve very, very, very quickly, right? The other thing to be aware of is developmentally, when children are in their early stages of life, they really need directive leadership. As a parent, you're a leader. Accept that, okay? If you're a parent, you're a leader, or at least we hope you're a leader. You're either a good leader or you're a bad leader, but as a parent, you're a leader because your kids are going to follow you, okay? Period, end of story. And so, 0 to 5, if we give you a little bit of framework, that's directive leadership. It's not great to ask your kids what they want because they don't have comprehension to even understand the basis of decision making. And so if your child's 3 years old and you go up to your child and you go, oh, would you like to do martial arts or ballet? They're like, they don't even know what you're asking them, much less what they're answering, okay? And so the key when they're that young is go, what does my child need that's going to build a foundation for success? And it's like, hey, you will eat this. You will try this. You are going to bed at this time. You will wake up at this time. You will do these classes. You are going to learn swimming, right? It's like you just sort of, put them in the things that are building a foundation for their success. They shouldn't get a lot of input or they shouldn't have a lot of input about what they do and don't do at that stage in their life because they don't really understand the whole dynamic of yes or no because their psyche's not developed yet. Right? Now, when you go into that next stage of life, right, they move out of, the infant stage and maybe go into more like adolescence, right, 7 years old up until teenage years. Now you start teaching them about choice and cause and effect and consequence and all that kind of thing, right? It's like, hey, would you like to do this or that? If you do this, here's what it'll mean. If you do that, here's what it will mean. Which one do you prefer? And you start, introducing that to them. And then, teaching things like, okay, once you made this choice, you're committed for 6 months and they want to quit in 2 months, make sure they see it out, right? And so it's like, ask the question, what is the dynamic that I can be inside of with them that's going to teach them the way of being that's going to support them through life? That's different than, hey, how do I alleviate their suffering and their pain right now? And how do I make them feel good? A lot of times our impulse, because we care, we love for our kids, etc., is you want to take away their pain. And oftentimes at the cost of that is, they become less strong or they become less capable. And so if you just simply ask the question, hey, what are the dynamics I can reinforce here that are going to translate to strength and resiliency and self-reliance, that's going to support them to thrive in the world, right? And then, they get into their teenage years. The key here is, really teach them or relate to them like they're an adult with proper boundaries. And so it's like, man, if they're, going through life as a teenager and they're making choices and decisions that are going to go bad, but it's not life defining, you've got to let them make those bad choices and then teach them how to evaluate the choice they made and what they answered to and why they answered to it and how do they make a different choice moving forward, and use the opportunities to talk them through that process so they learn how to make decisions for themselves and they learn the skill of critical thinking and they learn how to evaluate and they learn how to adapt, right? And it's like you want to walk them through that process as opposed to keep them from the pain, because you can't do so anyway. Like if you've ever had a teenager and you tell them not to do X and that it's going to go bad, they're pretty sure it's going to go fine, and now they're more likely to do it because they know they're testing their independence, and sometimes it's just because they know that you want them to do it, so they don't, right, and that kind of thing. And so teach them how to manage those decisions. Teach them how to make bad choices, how to recover from the bad choice, how to evaluate, how to make a new choice moving forward. Like there's your last stage of preparing them to be an adult, hopefully out there on their own, right? It's that last phase that you get. Now, if they're going to do something that's life-defining and detrimental, sure, come in with a hard boundary, right? If they're, I don't know what that might be, but it's like, different circumstances, show up in life sometimes where if your kid does X, this could be detrimental. And so it's like set a hard boundary in those places where, it's going to be hard to recover from. But at the same point, it's like they need to skin their knees a little bit and understand how to overcome challenges and how to evaluate their mistakes and things of that nature. And so again, the theme and I know I'm giving you like a very broad overview here, and we could go into all kinds of different tactics and techniques and tools and strategies at different phases of life and et cetera, and what's most effective and why, and we'll do that at some point in time. But for this training, what I really wanted you to take away is the role of a parent and sort of what is the job that I have, and then how do I think about that development through different periods of life, right? So if we give a quick overview, it's like, hey, my job as a parent is to be a leader first and foremost. Number two, it's to support my kids to become self-reliant as quickly as possible so they can take care of themselves if something ever happened to me, or there is going to be a day, hopefully, that they need to take care of themselves because you're not around anymore. Hopefully our kids outlive us, right, is the idea anyway, and we want them to thrive, right? As a parent, you want your kids to thrive, and so that's how you set that up. And then, once we understand that our general job is to lead them as best we can and to really get them to become a self-reliant human being as quickly as possible, one who is ready to thrive. Now, if we think about that through those different phases of life, it's going to occur to us, how to be with them. Remember, number 4, I guess, kids always learn by way of example first. Adolescent, adult, teenager, etc. That's how we learn as human beings. So your just way of being is the best way to lead your children, especially from the get-go, especially when they're young and they're infants, right? And remember, those first 5 years of life, that's directive leadership. That's, I'm telling my kids what to do. I'm putting them in the programs that are going to develop a strong foundation. It doesn't matter if they like it, they don't like it. We just make sure we fulfill their needs so that they've got a strong base for when they start making decisions, right? They have to kind of understand what it is to do what they enjoy and what they like, and also understand what it is to, have experiences that they don't like, and how to manage all of that, right? And the way that they learn that is directive leadership. You're telling them what to do. You're putting them in the situations where they're going to grow and they're going to develop well, hopefully. Then that next stage of life, like adolescence, right? 7-ish years of age till about teenage years. Now you're introducing choice and you're reinforcing that choice, and you're basically teaching them how to think through their decisions and the pros and cons, and how to engage all of that while still making decisions on their behalf that are important, right? That are essential for their development, because they don't know. They've never developed themselves, and they've never trained or developed another human being, so they don't know how to make great decisions for themselves. So you're teaching them how to make decisions while also making some decisions on their behalf in their adolescent. Then when they get into teenage years, it's like 90-10. 90% is really teaching them how to make decisions, how to answer to their the cause and the effect of their decisions, right? They're going to answer to good decisions. They're going to answer to bad decisions. How to think through and evaluate their decisions so that they make better decisions moving forward, and repeat that process. And you're only coming in at that like 10% with your teenagers where, man, if they do this, it's going to be detrimental and potentially life-defining. Everywhere else, it's creative will, right? You're influencing artfully them on how to make great decisions for themselves and become an adult. And then when they become an adult, what is the role that you play? Hopefully it's support and encouragement, and you're there if they need an assist, right? And they're doing most of it on their own at this point, and you're there just to contribute and be that assist. And hopefully your relationship when they become an adult can evolve more into camaraderie, or a little bit more of a friendship and things like that, because they are self-reliant. They're on their own. They're independent now. But man, until they're independent, your job is to lead them to self-reliance and independence. And if you just think of that framework, you're going to come up with all kinds of ideas on how to do this really well and get better and better and better at it. And remember, first and foremost, we can only lead others to the ability in which we lead ourselves. right? So whenever you're asking your child to do something or you're wanting them to take something on, healthy eating or whatever it might be, you got to stop and go, am I demonstrating this? Is this who I am with them and with myself? Because that's always a first step of leadership, whether that's with our kids or our employees or our friends or other people that we want to make an impact on. So hopefully this training was helpful for you. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of a framework, a way to think about things, because it's so easy, because when we love our kids, to drop into that other space of, hey, I want to take away their pain. I want to keep them from suffering. And so we kind of swoop in to keep them from challenge and make everything okay for them. And the cost of that is we cripple them, right? We really do set them up not to thrive in the world. We set them up to fail. Whereas if we ask the question, how can I support self-reliance here? How can I strengthen them? How can I teach them resiliency in a healthy way? That's going to not only position them to succeed and thrive in the world, but it also positions you and them to have such a better relationship and be so much closer, especially as they get older and they move into adulthood and maybe have their own kids one day and things of that nature. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.